How much would you say doing conventions factors into your career?
Oh. Well, percentage-wise, probably I'd say about 20%. It's an important revenue raiser, but more important is making the connections with people. My philosophy is if a fan or a collector has a choice between two pieces of art, and one of them, they know the guy who did it and that guy's been really nice to them, they're going to buy that one instead of this one. And so I've found that philosophy really pays off.
And how many conventions have you done?
Let's see.
Bro. Sorry.
Sure.
How many conventions have you done in your life?
Oh, total? Man, hundreds. Hundreds. I one of the few people who has been to every single Comic-Con in San Diego since the very first one. I was a guest at the first one. The guests were me and Jack Kirby and Mike Royer. And how many I do per year varies each year. Last year, because of the economy, I decided to do a lot of conventions. So I did between 12 and 20 last year. A lot of travel. About a decade ago, I was doing so many that I had an anxiety attack on the plane because I couldn't remember what city I was flying to. So I've taken a much calmer approach to convention traveling since then.
What was your first con experience like?
First con experience was a science fiction convention in Santa Monica. It was called WesterCon. And I had never seen anything like it. It was extraordinary. It was writers and artists and science fiction fans. And I think it may have been the first place I met Harlan Ellison. We became friends at that show. It was the first time I ever saw any work by the Filipino cartoonists like Alex Nino and Alfredo Alcala. It was a really extraordinary experience. And one of the things I loved about it, it was a place where like-minded people who loved science fiction and horror and fantasy, could get together in a safe place where no one was going to make fun of us. We all shared this common interest, and it was just a great place to relax and make new friends and meet with old friends.
How much has changed since that first time?
Let's see. In some ways, not at all. In other ways, dramatically. Comic-Con started out with guys with boxes of comics for 25 cents each, and almost out of a garage or in a hotel. And now it is comics. Really, there's very little to do with comics at Comic-Con now in San Diego. It's primarily focused on film and television. Now, a lot of those film and television programs, the content is comics related, like the new superhero movies like Iron Man and Thor. But you won't find cheap comics at Comic-Con because the booths cost too much for a person to be selling 25-cent comics. So that's a dramatic change. Also, there's a proliferation now of conventions all over the country. In almost every major city there's a convention. And that didn't used to be. There just used to be a few. There were some in LA, San Francisco, New York primarily. And then it just started to spread.
What do you see for the future of conventions? How much will it factor in for artists?
Well, I think the medium-sized conventions will get larger. I think the smaller-sized conventions will get larger. And the huge conventions, boy, San Diego is in sort of a dilemma now because they have reached capacity of the Anaheim or the San Diego Convention Center. And so, their tickets, their 5-day passes sell out in about 10 minutes. So there's a lot of people who would love to go to Comic-Con but can't because the venue itself just does not have the capacity for the people. Now, I understand that the San Diego Convention Center is actually adding on to accommodate Comic-Con, but I don't know if they can add on enough to accommodate the gigantic crowds that go there. I think also we're going to start to see more specialized conventions. Comic-Con is a broad convention that encompasses pretty much all the different aspects of pop culture, especially if they're comic related. But I think you're going to see more conventions that are, say, specific to horror films or specific to a particular type of comic being published. I think 8 is a good example of that, the Alternative Press Expo. That's a convention solely devoted to alternative comics. And that's actually one of my favorite shows. You get a really high caliber of fan there. They're very literate, very well read. And it's a small convention, but I like the small shows because they're more intimate and it's easier to meet people and talk to people. At Comic-Con, from the moment I open on Wednesday to the moment I close on Sunday, it is non-stop sales. There's almost no possibility for conversation. My favorite convention is in Louisville, Kentucky. It's Wonderfest. And it's just an old-fashioned, very warm, family-friendly convention. The people are so nice and so sweet. They're really appreciative of the people who make the films that they like and the people who make the comics that they like. It's a fantastic show. I highly recommend Wonderfest.
Do you think our artists are one of the most important factors at the convention?
Boy, that depends on the convention goer. The artists are definitely a draw, but so now are the writers. And that's an unusual phenomenon that began with Alan Moore and Neil Gaiman. Prior to their entering comics, the primary focus of collectors was art in comics. And they came along and changed that and made writing a focus. And for the first time, people would buy comics not for the art, but because they loved those writers. And that changed comics dramatically. Part of the appeal too is the freebies the fans get at conventions, the premiums, the toys. There's all kinds of different things to collect in this world of conventions.
Would you say artists were more prominent in the older days for conventions or in the newer days?
They were the big draws in the old days. I think they're still a big draw, but there are other draws to conventions as well.
What was your best experience?
Wow. Let's see, best experience. Well, I always have a good experience at Comic-Con. One of the things I love about Comic-Con is, I don't want to sound crass, but it is where the high rollers come to buy art. And so my biggest collectors are almost always present at Comic-Con. And I've developed a fan base of collectors who are also motion picture film directors, like Frank Darabont and Guillermo del Toro. And so because of them, not only do I sell major pieces of work, but it was through Comic-Con that Guillermo hired me to work on Pan's Labyrinth. So the work that comes out of there is amazing. And then Frank Darabont each year at Comic-Con hosts a dinner with all his favorite artists and occasional film directors. And for me, those dinners are the highlight. It's a chance to relax. It's always in a great restaurant and with great company. And we talk film, we talk art, we talk comics. It's extraordinary.
What's the worst experience you've had?
Oh, worst experience? Oh man. Okay. I was doing a show in Austin, Texas, and a lot of times young artists will come up to me and they want to show their portfolio and get feedback, and I'm fine with that. And this kid came up and asked if he could do that. And I said, sure. We took out this huge portfolio, laid it out over my table, covering everything I had for sale. So instantly my sales dropped to zero. And then he insisted that I look at each and every single piece. And if I was flipping the pages too fast, he would stop me and demand that I look more closely at the individual piece. And it was like, it was slow and it was painful. And the kid was quite frankly rude. And I thought, how am I going to get rid of this? Because, I mean, this was a gigantic folio. I knew if I continued at that speed, it would be 2 hours later before I finished it. And I looked around and I saw my friend Mark Schultz in the distance. And I said, you know who really loves to look at portfolios like this? It's Mark Schultz. And I waved at Mark, and Mark lit up and smiled and waved at me and said, see, he's eager to see you. So the kid quickly scooped everything up and shot over to Mark, and about 20 minutes later, Mark is giving me the stink eye. I found out later that this kid already had a reputation at this convention. His nickname was Corn Boy, because at one of the Austin shows, they had a buffet, and he went right to the big platter of all the corn on the cob and took every single piece of corn on the cob. From that moment on, he was known as Corn Boy. So I don't know what Cornboy's doing now, but I bet it's not art.
Lord.
Yeah.
Okay, this is like a little side quick thing. I'm also just seeing how many people know about this. Do you know about a guy named Rob Granito?
Rob who?
Granito?
No.
I think we're good.
Okay. Oh, I have another great convention experience. This really was one of the peak moments of my life, actually. I love doing the show back east. It's called Chiller Theater. They do it twice a year, Halloween and in spring. And it's the biggest monster convention in the country. It's put on by Kevin Clements, who is the rhythm guitar player for a rock band called the Dead Elvi. So on Saturday night, they usually have about 3 or 4 bands play, and the Elvi are the headliners, and they're a great band. I became friends with the lead guitar player, Chris Pomeranian. And Chris called me up before one of the shows, and he said, well, I had become friends with Chris, and he found out that I sang and played harmonica in bands. And so every time I go to Chiller, they invite me up on stage to play some songs with the Elvi. So we had established that precedent. And Chris called me up. He said, how would you like to sing Roadhouse Blues with Ray Manzarek, the keyboard player from The Doors, on keyboards? I said, are you kidding? I am there already. I said, how is this happening? Well, Chris was helping with some of the booking of the guests, and he found out that Ray Manzarek had a new book. And so he thought, what if I could get Ray Manzarek here to promote his book, invite him out as a guest, and then get him to play with the Elvi? So he approached Ray, and Ray was amenable to that. So he came out, and so the day that we were going to play, Ray was going sort of hot and cold. I don't know if I want to play. I haven't played in over 10 years. And then about an hour later, well, maybe one song. Then I don't know. I don't think I want to do this. And finally, he said, well, okay, just one song. We'll do Roadhouse Blues. And so Chris came to me. He said, well, instead of going on last, we're going to go on first before Ray changes his mind. Okay, we're going to do Roadhouse Blues. And I had been practicing. I knew they were going to do that song, so I'd been practicing all the harmonic parts of the vocals and stuff. And so the evening came, we got on stage, Ray was there on the keyboards, and we kicked in the Roadhouse Blues, and the response from the audience was unbelievable. He just tore the roof off the place. And I watched Ray's face, and I realized he hadn't been performing in front of a crowd for years and years and years, and he had forgotten what it was like. And he finished the number, and he leans over to me and he says, you want to do Light My Fire? I said, oh man, I so want to do. And of course, the Elvi, who also, all the members who were in like bar bands, they all knew Light My Fire. So we kicked into Light My Fire, and I thought the roof was going to come off the place. It was just staggering. And about 2 weeks after that, Ray reformed the Doors and started touring. That was cool. And it all got videotaped, and it's on YouTube.
Good? Good.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.